Hello everyone, welcome to part 3 of Reconstruction. For this lesson, we're going to be looking at how does Congress take over Reconstruction from the President? Because as we looked at in part 2, we saw that President Johnson, he made his rules of what the southern states needed to do to be readmitted to the Union and to be reconstructed. But when the southern states begin to rejoin Congress, he's not enforcing those rules of like ratifying the 13th Amendment. So Congress decides that they need to take over for him and get these states reconstructed and make sure that they're following the new policies that the U.S. government is establishing. So under Congressional Reconstruction in 1866, they override those presidential vetoes. Because remember, President Johnson has vetoed the Civil Rights Act of 1866, and he has also vetoed the Freedmen's Bureau bill, which will assist the freedmen in kind of adjusting to their new life and to society. So Congress overrides those presidential vetoes, and remember that takes a 2/3 vote of Congress. They draft the 14th Amendment, which gives constitutional basis for the Civil Rights Act. And so that means the Constitution is going to be able to back up that act and say that they have to follow this law now because it's in the Constitution. It's not just a law, it's even bigger. It's part of the U.S. Constitution. And Johnson recommends southern states to not ratify this amendment. So he's again going against Congress and fighting against them. And we'll talk a little bit more about what the 14th Amendment does, what it states, in just a couple slides. The next slide. So the 14th Amendment states that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction, meaning they're part of the are now citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside. And no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. So they can't stop them from being able to vote because they're citizens. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So this is basically saying anybody that's born in the United States or becomes a U.S. citizen, naturalization, they become a U.S. citizen, cannot be denied of basic citizenship rights like voting. The 14th Amendment. So again, they're entitled to equal protection of the law. No deprivation by the states without due process. And so if a state prevents any male citizen, because we haven't gotten to women's suffrage, women's right to vote yet, the state could face penalties. So in 1866, they hold congressional elections. Johnson goes out on trains and he attempts to sway the voters and make them think differently about their congressional candidates and who they should vote for. And so once the 40th Congress is elected, they create the Reconstruction Act of 1867. This abolishes the governments that were formed in the Confederate States. So in 1866, the Confederate States had begun to create their new governments. Now this abolishes those governments that were created in 1866. It divides the states into 5 military districts, meaning that the military is going to come in and run those areas. They set up new requirements for readmission to the Union. They have to ratify the 14th Amendment, and those new state constitutions have to ensure African American men the vote. So here are what the military districts were. Virginia, being a much larger state with more people, is Military District 1. North Carolina and South Carolina, Military District number 2. Alabama, Georgia, and Florida, Military District 3. Arkansas and Mississippi, number 4. And Texas and Louisiana as District 5. And notice here, if you're looking at the map, we now have West Virginia. West Virginia did not exist on the map until the Civil War. That portion of Virginia broke away during the Civil War and created their own state over the difference on issues in regards to all the things that the Civil War was about. Okay, so we've been talking a lot about Johnson, and he and Congress, they're just butting heads. They can't get along. And so Congress formally impeaches Johnson. They charge him with misconduct in office. And only the House of Representatives has this sole power to do that. And then the person is then tried like a court in the Senate. So Johnson is technically formally charged, but he challenges and he's charged with failure to do certain things within his job as president. He's impeached by the House, and he challenges the Tenure of Office Act. The trial goes on in the Senate, and if the Senate had one more vote, he could have been potentially removed from office as president. So 1868 comes about, and there is a run for a new presidency, and Johnson is not going to run. And so now we have Ulysses S. Grant and Horatio Seymour running for president in 1868. And Grant, remember, is one of the main generals for the Union Army during the Civil War. And so he's kind of seen as a war hero. So he wins handily. He beats Seymour quite well. He's a very popular candidate. And you can see here on the map that Seymour wins very few states. And we don't have votes coming from the 3 states in green, Texas, Mississippi, and Virginia, because at the time they're not considered reconstructed yet. They have not officially rejoined the Union yet. But Georgia votes for Seymour. They are not on Grant's side, okay? All right, that is the end of Part 3, and we've talked about the 14th Amendment, so you should have filled in that information on your note sheet. And in our next portion, we will be talking about the 15th Amendment, and then we will also be discussing what tasks you need to complete on Edmodo from all 4 parts and kind of compiling all the information that you've learned. Okay, I'll talk more about that at the end of Part 4.